This video is on Dred Scott versus Sanford and universal law. In 1857, Dred Scott was a slave. He was taken by his master or owner to a free state. When they returned to his home state, he decided to fight his owner in a court of law, claiming that because he had been taken to a free state, that he was a free man. However, the judge and courts decided that the Constitution of the United States does not apply to black people. Inalienable rights, my ass. This is one of the darkest days in our history. Just one court case. It pales in comparison with the 13th Amendment, however. Now, Dred Scott is an important case, because after the Civil War, when it was declared that black people were human, well, we had to find someone else to take it out on. The homeless. And since most of those slaves were no longer property, they were thrown out and made homeless. And the 13th Amendment allowed them to become slaves for the state. Not just in the South, in all states. Now, we have universality of law. That means that the Constitution is supposed to apply to everyone. However, the Constitution did not apply to me. Still does not. The things that I did out of desperation because of the immoral and illegal actions of the courts, the Bollingers, and the police, as well as the general public and the media. There is no such thing as the Constitution. There's not. Writing it on paper doesn't change the fact that in reality, it does not apply. It does not apply to me because of specific words. Those words are mentally ill. In reality, those are hate words. The term I believe we should be using is mentally disabled. Now, what is it that disables me mentally? Abuse. Long-term abuse. My castle idea, that's just land. For all I care, it could be a fucking trailer park. But it's the land that makes you a human being. That's where the grandfather clause comes in. After the Civil War, the South declared that if your grandfather did not own land, neither could you. And you were stuck renting at 3 times the amount that you would have paid to purchase a house month by month. Dred Scott was a human being. Regardless of what the courts had to say about him, he was a human being. A Homo sapien. The difference between him and the judge came down to a matter of pigmentation of his skin. We live in a capitalist society. In a capitalist society, only those at the top get access to the Constitution or its rights. Therefore, they are not rights because they are not universal. They do not apply to the common person. And they certainly do not apply to the homeless. The quantity of shit that I have gone through the number of people that I have trusted that I knew not to. But I had to. I had to believe that someone out there cared enough to listen. Someone out there was sober enough to do something. We pay billions of dollars every year for the incarceration of the homeless. I do mean billions. When you're talking about the court costs, the cost of the lawyers, the cost of the judges. Meanwhile, there's no incentive for these public pretenders to win a case. No incentive whatsoever. It's not a bad mark on their record for losing. Universal law. That's what the Constitution is supposed to be. It's supposed to mean that I have the same rights as a black man or a white woman. But I don't. I get to hear quite often how black people cannot be racist because they're black. That in and of itself is racist. That in and of itself means that they are somehow more human than I because of the pigmentation in their skin. While they complain that white people, notice I said they, instead of citing specific black people who had said this. It's because so many have said this. So many have made these claims to me. Like I am the one who owned slaves. Like I am the one who refuses to allow them their universal rights. Yet my rights have been denied more than any black person that I have ever met. My rights to freedom of speech. It's illegal for me to speak about the Bollingers because of a court date I was not allowed to go to. I was prevented from going to. Because unlike a criminal court, in civil court, you can show what the fuck is going on. The Bollinger family and the police were heavily invested in preventing me from showing what was going on. In addition, the judge himself had and constituted a conflict of interest. My public defender refused to give her name to those courts. That judge claimed that I had made no effort whatsoever to try to make it to court. I had. The police had done everything that they could to prevent that from happening. But because of the term mentally ill, it is assumed that I am guilty. That term needs to be stricken from the record and stricken from the books. The term is mentally disabled. And that disability stems from the assault and the abuse as a homeless person by these, our United States. Multiple states. That's the thing you guys fail to recognize or choose not to recognize. The homeless are used as slave labor across the United States. Things that you are allowed to do in the privacy of your own home. Because we don't have a home, we're not allowed to do these things, such as urinate or sleep. You expect us to travel miles and miles and miles away from the services in order to go to sleep, paying no attention to how much extra work it is for us to do that. Dred Scott lost in court, but he is a great man for trying. I've been dealing with a lot of cowardice. People who aren't willing to try because they don't believe we can win. And I do mean we. People like Darren O'Connor. Now, the thing about Darren O'Connor is that he's in a house. The media has listened to him on multiple occasions. And although he was involved in my case, he refuses to stand up for me the way that he did for minorities in houses. Because Darren O'Connor himself is a racist. Whereas these people got the help that I was denied. This man wants to pretend like I am a terrible person for screaming about my rights being violated. That's what all of this streaming is about. The Bollingers owe me for the life of Natalie Bollinger. Ted Bollinger owes me his life for sparing it, for allowing him to live. Officer Lolatai assaulted at least 6 other homeless individuals, or people he perceived to be homeless, after assaulting me. Brandon Jepson, he and I are at odds because he always sides with the police. He hates homeless people. Same as Lolatai. Same as Steinman. My First Amendment right was taken away from me in a court date that I was prevented from going to. A court date that would have ultimately resulted in criminal charges against the Bollingers, their friends, and the police. This constitutes a conflict of interest. My public pretenders being incapable and unwilling to do their jobs to defend me in court is a conflict of interest. Locking me up and stealing my evidence is a conflict of interest. And Darren O'Connor doing the same thing. Well, I have no respect for the man as a result. Between helping me out by looking at the evidence and siding with others because I scream, maybe he should pay attention to why. From the beginning, this was a case of public opinion. And because it was a case of public opinion, I was never allowed an honest day in court. Never allowed an honest chance. Dred Scott would shit a brick if he saw what happened to this white boy. Slavery is legal in the United States. It's used to take tax money from poor people, making those poor people too poor to defend themselves in court. And if all these poor people stood together, something could happen. Darren O'Connor is a coward. Dred Scott was not. I am streaming for an honest chance, for someone to take a look at the evidence. There's a lot of evidence I don't have access to because I don't have the money for a lawyer. That's the problem with a capitalist society. No money means no rights. There is a way past this. When people stand up for you, like they did in the case of Zaid Atkinson and Samuel Leon Lawrence IV. But the fact is, both of these men live in houses. Both of these men have a residence. Both of these men are sheltered from the realities of homelessness. However, Sammy Leon Lawrence IV was homeless once. He understands and is well aware of what happens to the homeless. When Michelle Rodriguez was assaulted by Officer Lolatai, Sammy Leon Lawrence IV was the only man outside of that court with a sign. 2 days later, he was assaulted by that very same officer that assaulted myself and Michelle Rodriguez. Officer Waylon Lolatai. Sammy doesn't pretend that it's an issue of race. He understands that it's an issue of homelessness. So does Darren O'Connor. However, when that man, in the case of Zaid Atkinson, was recording what the police were doing from inside of that house, he was not assaulted by Officer Waylon Lolatai, who was there. Sammy Leon Lawrence IV was videotaping how those officers treat the homeless. How the homeless have less rights than Zaid Atkinson and are treated worse than Zaid Atkinson. They pretended he had a weapon and assaulted the fuck out of him. I was charged with assault with a deadly weapon. What was that deadly weapon? When I was assaulted in the Boulder County Hospital, I was in handcuffs. What weapon? They claimed I tried to bite them. I want you to count the teeth in my mouth. You will notice there are 0 teeth in my mouth. Fuck the media, fuck the Bollingers, fuck the courts, and fuck the police. Dred Scott is a human being.